The midnight nurse, Ella Morgan, had always dreamed of becoming a nurse. After years of studying and working through tough clinical rotations, she finally landed a job at a well-established hospital. It was a prestigious place, renowned for its treatment of rare diseases, and Ella was excited to start her first night shift as a full-time nurse. The first few hours went by smoothly. Ella was assigned to a quiet wing of the hospital, far from the hustle and bustle of the emergency room. The shift seemed routine. Patients in and out, vital signs to monitor, and paperwork to complete. But something was off. The wing, though nearly empty, had an eerie stillness. The fluorescent lights above hummed loudly, casting long shadows across the hallways. Ella couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She tried to ignore it, convincing herself that it was just the isolation of the night shift playing tricks on her. At around 2 a.m., Ella was doing her rounds when she noticed one of the patient rooms had its door slightly ajar. The patient inside, a middle-aged man named Mr. Peterson, had been unresponsive all night. As she entered the room to check on him, she felt a sudden drop in temperature. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. "Mr. Peterson?" There was no response, but something felt wrong. The machines monitoring his vital signs flickered for a moment before going completely silent. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her. Ella spun around, heart racing. She pushed the door open again, but it wouldn't budge. Panic rose in her chest. She was locked in. She tried calling for help, but the intercom was dead. Her phone had no signal. The lights flickered above her, casting unsettling shadows along the walls. Then she heard it, the sound of footsteps behind her. She whipped around, but no one was there. The only sound was the faint whistling of the air conditioning. "Who's there?" Ella demanded, trying to steady her breath. The footsteps continued, growing louder, but still, no one was in sight. Ella rushed to the window, but the blinds were drawn. She couldn't see outside, and the feeling of being trapped intensified. Suddenly, the door to the room creaked open, and standing there was Nurse Reynolds, the night supervisor. "Ella, what's going on?" Reynolds asked, her face pale and drawn. I don't know. I heard footsteps, and then the door just slammed shut. The lights went out, and Mr. Peterson, he's not breathing." Reynolds took a step into the room, her eyes scanning the area. "You're just tired. You need to rest. We'll check on Peterson." But Ella couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She stepped aside to let Reynolds examine the patient, but as the nurse reached for the heart monitor, it beeped loudly, signaling a flatline. "Wait," Ella whispered. "That wasn't like this before. The machine was working fine." Reynolds turned to her, her expression cold. "Ella, you need to stop. This is just the stress getting to you. Go get some rest." She was tired, but as she walked down the hallway toward the staff lounge, she heard it again. The unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. Her heart pounded. She spun around, but no one was there. Her breath quickened. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, the doors seeming to grow farther apart. At that moment, Ella remembered something. A colleague had mentioned strange things happening at night in this particular wing, but she brushed it off as hospital gossip. Now it seemed far too real. She turned a corner and nearly collided with another nurse, Nurse Jenkins. "Are you okay?" Jenkins asked, concern in her eyes. There's something wrong here," Ella said, her voice trembling. "I'm not imagining this." Nurse Jenkins nodded, leading her to a small break room. "You've heard the stories, haven't you?" she asked. Ella's heart skipped. "What stories?" "This wing," Jenkins whispered, lowering her voice. "A long time ago, a patient died here. A woman. She was abandoned by a nurse who was supposed to care for her. The nurse was fired, but they say the woman's spirit never left." Ella's stomach turned. "You mean, she's still here?" Jenkins shrugged. "Some say she haunts the hospital at night, but she's not the only one. Over the years, others have reported seeing her, hearing her footsteps. They say she targets new nurses, ones who aren't familiar with the old stories. It's like a warning. The ghost makes sure they don't forget." Ella no sabía qué pensar, but she couldn't ignore the things she had experienced tonight. Her mind raced with questions, but before she could ask more, the lights flickered again. Suddenly, an announcement echoed through the hospital speakers. "Attention, all nurses, Please report to the emergency room immediately. As she rushed to the ER, she found a chaotic scene. Mr. Peterson, the man from her wing, was now in critical condition. But something was strange. His eyes were wide open, staring at her with a knowing look. "Don't forget me, Ella," he whispered, his voice eerily calm. "Don't forget what I've shown you." The temperature dropped again, and the lights flickered once more. The ghost of the woman from earlier appeared in the hallway, her face now visible. It was pale with sunken eyes, but her expression was filled with sorrow. Before Ella could react, Nurse Reynolds appeared, her face changing from concern to something darker, almost predatory. "You should have stayed out of it," she said in a low, menacing tone. "This is your last night." Suddenly, everything went dark. The temperature plummeted, and Ella felt herself pulled into the darkness, her body growing heavier with each passing second. But then, something shifted. The darkness faded, and she found herself back in the break room, safe, but the woman's ghost was gone. Ella gasped, waking up in the hospital lobby, drenched in sweat. She looked around. The shift was over. It was morning. Nurse Jenkins approached her, a faint smile on her face. "It's over now, Ella. You made it through the night. You're one of us now." Ella was shaken but relieved. As she left the hospital, she couldn't help but feel that she had narrowly escaped something far worse than just a restless night. But deep down, she knew this place held more secrets. Secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to uncover. Thank you for joining me in the shadows. If you enjoyed the journey, please subscribe and share a Creepy Vault 45 with friends, because some chills are best when we're not alone.